All right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for our final Titan Talk of 2023. We are really excited about today's speaker and the Titan Talk in general: diversity, equity, and inclusion. What is it and why is it important? With Dakisa Pina, PhD and Vice President of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at Illinois Wesleyan University. I do want to start with a few housekeeping notes, as always, before we begin. You are viewing today's webinar as an audience member, and therefore you will not have the ability to turn on your microphone or your video, but questions are encouraged and can be submitted anytime through the Q&A feature or the chat at the bottom of your screen. And there will also be dedicated time at the end of the presentation to answer those questions. If you are having a technical issue, you can reach out to our Office of Alumni Engagement at 309-556-3093 or by email to iwualum@iwu.edu. And a recording of today's Titan Talk will be available to view on the Office of Alumni Engagement YouTube page, and you will be sent a link and a short survey tomorrow morning-ish if you're interested in viewing the talk that way or sharing with others. Alrighty. Now that we've covered some of that, let me get to introducing our speaker. Dakisa Pina is Illinois Wesleyan University's inaugural Vice President for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. In this role, Dakisa brings a strategic and inclusive lens to the pursuit of educational excellence. And before serving in this role, Dakisa actually worked down the street at that other university, Illinois State, as the first college-level EDI officer for the College of Education. She completed her doctorate degree in marriage and family therapy at Texas Tech University, and her master's degree at Indiana State University, and her bachelor's at Bowling Green State University. Dakisa enjoys providing training on a variety of different topics, including difficult dialogue, cultural competency, and cultural humility. Dakisa is also very active in the Bloomington Normal community, serving as a member of Jack and Jill of America Incorporated, Sigma Gamma Rho Sorority Incorporated, and an advisory council member for A Better Tomorrow. When not working or volunteering, Dakisa spends her time with her children, her husband, and her friends. Dakisa, thank you so much for joining us today. I will turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Kaylee. I just want to tell everybody in the audience how excited I was that I got an invitation to speak to our alumni. It is not often when I have an audience with past Titans. Of course, I get to see our students on campus, I get to interact with faculty and staff on campus. But I'm so excited to have this time to hang out with you all, our Titan alumni. So, welcome. So, I entitled my talk Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. First of all, what is it? So many people have different misconceptions about what DEI is. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that. And also, why in the world is this stuff important? Why should we care about the field of diversity, equity, and inclusion? So I thought I would tell you a little bit about myself. So when I was a really little girl, I remember I think I might have been in fifth grade. My teacher said, I want you all to write an assignment about what you want to do when you grow up. Well, who in the world knew, right? Even some of our students at Illinois Wesleyan still don't necessarily know what they want to do as a career. So I am dating myself, telling you how old I am right now, but my family had the full set. That's how fancy we were. We had the full set of Encyclopedia Britannicas. So those of you who remember the Encyclopedia Britannica, it was just a set of books A through Z that were kind of like a dictionary with pictures, and they just tell you a lot about the world around you. So, what I did for that assignment, and yes, I was a terrible student in elementary school, but I did get my PhD. So I shifted and changed a little bit. But I remember pulling out the P encyclopedia and looking up the largest words. So, what is the biggest word that I can find? So, I found two. One was pediatrician and one was psychologist. and I wrote about being a psychologist. And from there, I just learned more about what it would mean to be a psychologist, what it would mean to be a mental health professional. And it's really something that just fit my personality. I'm the person in the grocery store. I feel so bad for my poor children, but I'm the person in the grocery store that strangers will walk up to and have a full hour-long conversation with. I'm that person. And so it was just a really good fit for me to go into the field of mental health. But I'll tell you that my junior year of college, I was studying psychology, thought I wanted to be a psychologist, and I thought, oh my goodness, I don't get this Freud stuff. It doesn't make sense to me. I don't get this Jungian stuff. It doesn't make sense to me what is going on with the psychology thing. And so I found a marriage and family therapy class that I fell in love with. It made sense to me. It made sense to me that the individual is impacted by the family and their environment and what's going on around them. And I really dove into learning about change and systems change and how the system impacts the person and how I could help the world be a better place by helping families and communities to be able to change. So that's why I became a marriage and family therapist. That led me on a journey to start working at Illinois State University's College Counseling Center. And in 2014 at Illinois State University, they asked every department, including the counseling center, to start a diversity, equity, and inclusion like a team and to have somebody to lead that team. And so my supervisor at the time asked me to lead that team in 2014, and it was the ISU Student Affairs. It was like a cultural climate committee. And they started to train us on diversity, equity, and inclusion, making sure that people felt welcomed and as if they belonged in our workspace, making sure that anybody who interacted with our workspace, so that would not only include students, but it would include the faculty that came in to drop off students for mental health concerns. It would include parents who might come into the counseling center. Anybody who had an interaction with the counseling center, it was really my role to use data and best practices to be able to shift and transform the counseling center into a place that removed the barriers and was a welcoming and inclusive place. So that's kind of where I fell in love with and started to practice diversity, equity, and inclusion work and really just learn about the empirical data and research behind DEI. And so once I fell in love with that, I knew that diversity, equity, and inclusion was going to be the field that I eventually went into. So I applied for and became the inaugural director of diversity, equity, and inclusion at Illinois State University in the College of Education. So I was the first DEI officer in a college at a university at Illinois State University. So I was there for 2 years, really trying to do what I call systemic and sustainable change. There are first order changes, which is where you go to your workshops, you build your knowledge base. The second order change is really about changing a system as a whole. And that's what was really important for me at Illinois State University in the College of Education. One of the things that I learned there is that being in a position and in a place where you could impact policy change really helped to meet the need of systemic change. And so I knew I wanted to then um, get to a place where I could be at the cabinet level at a university. So apply for vice president positions or chief diversity officer positions. And so here I am, lucky me at Illinois Wesleyan University. as the inaugural Vice President for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. And again, I took that move forward in my career so that I could make more systemic, sustainable, and successful changes in the university environment to make sure that all identities felt um, like they belonged in higher education. So I want to kind of start from the beginning. I told you a little bit about me, but I wanted to tell you a little bit about diversity, equity, and inclusion in higher education. So, as higher education began to open its doors to historically underrepresented individuals, like in the late 60s, early 70s, it became really clear that our institutions of higher education were not fully prepared to support the students who walked through their doors. A lot of times these students were from first generation families, or they were from low income families, and higher education was just not built for the needs of these particular students. So that is actually when diversity offices started to emerge in higher education to help facilitate the success of these particular students on our campuses. Subsequently, as the years went on, then you started to see your chief diversity officers, your senior diversity officers, your vice presidents for diversity, equity, and inclusion. The death of George Floyd really kind of accelerated this field. And those diversity officers really emerged with a primary focus, and this is my focus at Illinois Wesleyan, of serving the institution as a whole. So our diversity offices are usually focused on students. Vice presidents and chief diversity officers are focused on the institution as a whole. So that not only includes the success of our students, but it includes the success of our faculty and staff in higher education. And this role is also really important because as our society continues to become increasingly diverse, values change, systems change. Excuse me. The question is whether higher institutes of higher education are going to be able to catch up with the change, whether we're going to be able to be innovative enough, and whether we're going to be able to meet the needs of the diverse population that is coming into higher education. Also, vice presidents of diversity, equity, and inclusion, we also help to fulfill the mission and vision of higher education institutions. So, again, if you're thinking about the institutional level, our focus is not only on the student, it's focused on our research at the institutional level, our education. Do we have inclusive classrooms? Do we have accessible classrooms to be able to prepare global leaders, whether that's faculty, staff, or students, and to be able to innovate? So that's the role of a vice president for diversity, equity, and inclusion. If you also think about it, one of the ways that helps folks kind of think about why uh, a VP of DEI is important at an institution, if you think about the field of information technology and how so I'm again aging myself, and that's fine. I'm very proud to be who I am. But my freshman year of college, you remember that brick cell phone, if any of you remember that? My freshman year of college is when that came out, that brick cell phone that was literally like holding a child that you could talk on. Since then, the invention of the internet and all of these different things have really shaped and shifted our society and our culture. In the same way as that culture shifts, as we diversify with different values and different identities, it is my role to make sure that we are moving in that direction, similar to how our information technology centers and offices have grown. And they continue to make sure that we are in um, 2023 and preparing for 2024. So, again, helping to identify and remove barriers, as well as making sure that campus is inclusive of faculty, staff, and students, all faculty, staff, and students. So, why in the world do we need DEI at IWU? Well, diversity, equity, and inclusion is not just imperative for our underrepresented students, but it's also increasingly necessary to provide skills and knowledge for future leaders. Again, our faculty, staff, and students. We are becoming a global world. That internet thing has made it possible for us to talk, to communicate, do business with folks on the other side of the world. And so we need to be able to know and understand different cultures to be able to innovate and to be able to problem solve and to do business with those specific cultures. And so, if we think about the importance of cultural competency, which means understanding cultural norms, as well as cultural humility, that means when we make a mistake, when we're interacting with people who are different, culturally different than us, that we're able to move through that mistake and to repair those relationships. And so that is also part of my role here at Illinois Wesleyan. DEI really works to help people ensure that no matter what background they come from, that they have opportunity to access and succeed in higher learning. Also, if you think about law, so what's legal versus what's kind of ethical. Um, Discriminatory practices, we know that that is not legal in our society, but we also know that it happens. And so if you think about again, I'm old, excuse me, I'm older. So I still watch 60 Minutes. They have great documentaries. You can see I have my PhD. I just love to learn. I'm very curious. But they recently did a program about housing and refusal to sell housing in 2023 to different families based off of their race. So these things still exist, even though they're illegal, whether it's leasing apartments, whether it's rentals. Um, Also, COVID really helped us to see the inequities in healthcare based off of race, based off of your income level. Um, there's a lot of things to work on to really remove barriers and inequity, and those things still exist in higher education also. I know that it's really, really hard to believe for some people that there is discrimination in our institutes of higher education. But sometimes that implicit bias, the bias that we don't know about, and sometimes that explicit bias, the bias that we do know about, does play a role in higher education and in success of our faculty, staff, and students in higher education. At its core, diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DEI, the work is really about the task of effectively recognizing the importance of consistently being able to give faculty, staff, and students that basic principle of our American democracy, um, allowing them to be able to function in our American democracy in a way that is beneficial to everyone and inclusive to everyone on IWU's campus. So an example that I give a lot is we have this amazing thing called the Constitution. And every time I hear about the Constitution, I am blown away by these forefathers who thought about this amazing system of how democracy works. I'm really blown away about the innovation of the Constitution, as well as the importance of the amendments of the Constitution. So if you think about US society and the shifts in US society, our values, our culture, you'll also know that we have several amendments to the Constitution. At some point, we thought maybe women should have the right to vote. Maybe they should. And so that was an amendment to the Constitution. In the same way, diversity, equity, and inclusion looks for those ways to open up opportunities to that democratic ideal or that democratic system in our institutions of higher education, and specifically in this jewel that we call Illinois Wesleyan. So I talked to you a little bit about this, but my role is really to provide strategic leadership for the entire institution. So again, the Office of Diversity and Inclusion, which we have and which I oversee, is very student focused. My role is institutional wide. Inevitably, every senior leader on the campus has issues of diversity that fall within their portfolio. I am a consultant to our senior leaders, to our students, to our faculty, and to our staff. My role is also to partner with our leadership to include and create institutional excellence, and to help us fulfill the strategic imperatives of our mission at Illinois Wesleyan. So I provide direct support to the diverse communities on campus. I try to ensure that they have the resources that they need to fulfill the mission of Illinois Wesleyan. Also, my role involves building institutional capacity, including knowledge that's in line with Illinois Wesleyan's. And if you haven't read specifically our vision statement, I would really encourage you to read it. If you've read it and haven't read it in a while, I would really encourage you to read it because it talks a lot about societal justice. It talks a lot about environmental justice. And so, based off of that vision, my work is to make sure that what we do on campus is aligned with our DEI values, which in the vision statement include justice on campus. So DEI work is not only imperative for our underrepresented students, but it's necessary again for everybody at our institution to help them get the skills and the knowledge that we need to function in our diversified society, to be able to innovate and problem solve in our diversified society. DEI really helps to ensure that people of all backgrounds, not just race, but socioeconomic status, gender identity, ability, disability, that everybody has an opportunity to be successful in higher education. And I am lucky enough to be able to help us to equip Illinois Wesleyan in a way that we can thrive and be global leaders. All right, so let's get to the definitions of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So, diversity is all about acknowledging difference. So, I would say, like in the 80s, 90s, we would say that diversity is about celebrating differences. Now we talk about how diversity is acknowledging differences and not just acknowledging that we have differences, but acknowledging how we can benefit from differences. If you think about the Fortune 500 companies, right, on that Fortune 500 list, we have Google, we have Amazon, we have lots of large corporations. They intentionally hire a diverse workforce. They go all over the world to look for diversity in their workforce because they know that that is what is going to keep them at a place in that Fortune 500 where they can be above grade. They can be future thinking, innovative, they can solve problems. When you have folks with different mindsets, which is a part of diversity, you think about things differently. That's a way to innovate and to solve problems is to bring those teams and those minds together. So it's not just about celebrating, it's about acknowledging and understanding the benefit, the wonderful benefit that we have when we have folks in a space who are diverse based off of the political affiliations, just all the different identities that we have that intersect together. Equity. Equity is all about giving people what they need to be successful and removing barriers. So a lot of times we put equity and access together because access falls into the definition of equity. So when you think about equity, I really want you to think about um, when you walk on Illinois Wesleyan's campus. Think about folks with physical disabilities. Are our buildings accessible to them? Are our sidewalks accessible to them? If you have a wheelchair that you need to use to get around on campus, how easy is it for you? What are the barriers there? So, disability is just one area that you can look through the lens of equity with. There's so many different identities to do that with, but equity is all about removing those barriers to be able to help people be successful no matter what identities they come to Illinois Wesleyan with. And then lastly, inclusion. Inclusion is all about that psychological safety, that feeling of belonging. And I know a lot of people think, well, you're there for an education or you go to work and you work. What do they say on the, like on a lot of reality TV shows? You hear the folks on the TV show who are going to win a prize. They'll say something like, well, I'm not here to make friends. Well, institutes of higher education, a lot of times those are our homes, specifically for our students. They live, they work, they play together on our campus. So we can't say that so, when I was younger too in college, I would hear a lot about hard and soft sciences. So psychology is a soft science, and then biology would be a hard science, right? Both of those are important. For my researchers out there, quantitative data is just as important as qualitative data. Hearing somebody's voice qualitatively is just as important as getting the numbers and the data. So when you think about inclusion, we're talking about that feeling of belonging. Another example is that we used to base a lot of things in higher education off of IQ and attainment. But recently, we've come up with several. Harvard, I think, has 8 different lenses of intelligence. But recently, we've learned a lot about emotional IQ. So I think it's called EQ. EQ. So that is just as important. And research tells us that that emotional piece of going to work, the climate of your workspace for faculty and staff, as well as for our students, is extremely important. So my role includes inclusion and that cultural sense of belonging inside of the classroom, around spaces on campus. That is what inclusion means. I hope these definitions were valuable for you. I hope that it helped to kind of demystify what diversity, equity, and inclusion actually means. What my role is at Illinois Wesleyan and for DEI professionals in business and other institutions of higher education. And I hope that you learned a little bit about me. So I am going to open it up to questions, and I will ask the moderator to come back in and give me some questions, and hopefully I'll be able to answer them. Thank you all so much.
All right. Thank you so much, Takisa. Alrighty. We have been getting a number of questions. We are going to try and answer what we can, what we have time for. Thank you all for submitting those. Again, reminder, you are able to put those in the chat feature or the Q&A feature. We are going through both channels. So we'll be trying to get to either question in any of those options. Alrighty. First question here. What changes have you seen at other universities who have adopted DEI staff roles?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think some of the changes that I've seen have been in hiring practices. So there is a really big push to understand the bias, how the biases that we have, whether they're implicit or whether they're explicit, and how they play a role in hiring practices. So, in our human resources departments in a lot of institutes of higher education, we are building what we call a search advocacy program. And that originally came out of, oh, I hope I'm okay, yes, Oregon State University. I didn't want to give the wrong people credit, but that originally came out of Oregon State University. And I've seen many, many, many institutions using the research that supports hiring practices and how biases play a role, biases play a role to be able to work on diversity, equity, and inclusion. So, again, it's all about removing barriers when it comes to hiring practices, even asking simple questions like, do we need, in our institution of higher education, do we need a PhD to do this work? Do we even need a master's level to do this work? Because in institutes of higher education, a lot of times we have these biases where there's a million doctors walking around, right? Dr. Pena, Dr. This person, Dr. that person. And we have these biases that you need that PhD to do the job. But we have to ask ourselves, is that correct? Do we just have a bias towards PhDs, master's degree, or a degree of higher higher education in general, even a bachelor's degree? So that's one of the things that I've seen that has been highly supported in our institutes of higher education when it comes to hiring practices for our faculty and our staff.
Thank you. I do you want to just keep going through questions here? I'll do my best to kind of go back and forth.
Sure.
But next one being, what are your long-term goals for IWU, and what does an ideal campus community look like for you?
I love that you're asking for me. Um, so my long-term goals, now what you will learn about me if you get to interact with me in the future is I am a data head. Like my foundations are based off of data. So, one of the things that I'm doing, and this will answer your question and not answer your question at the same time, but in February, we set up an institutional wide campus climate survey. I'm partnering with institutional effectiveness to roll out that survey so that I can figure out what the long term goals are for Illinois Wesleyan. I don't want to just start subjectively rolling out long-term goals when I don't have the data that I feel like I need to support what those goals need to be. So those long-term goals will probably short and long-term goals will probably be the goal is to have those start to roll out in fall of 2024. The survey will come out February 2024. We'll have time to analyze that data using statistical analyses, figure out what that data is saying quantitatively and qualitatively, and then build an action plan. So sorry I couldn't answer your question, but I can answer the question when you asked me about what was the question? What I would like to see campus kind of look like in the future?
Yes, the second part here was, what does an ideal campus community look like to you?
Oh my gosh. So, an ideal campus community looks like faculty, staff, students, alumni, community members who are able to step into what I call a brave space. The biggest barrier for belonging, inclusion, all benefits of diversity is us being fearful to be able to talk to people and and we mess up, right? So for example, my I think it was my first month on campus, I had met a student. We had a great time together, great relationship building. The next time I saw that student, I misgendered that student. The student didn't say anything to me. It just popped into my head. That's not their pronoun. They told me this is what they prefer to be called, and here I go. Just, making a mistake. That's okay. What I did was I leaned into that and I said, you know what? I think I misgendered you. I am so sorry. Could you please remind me? This person was like, yes, you did. And I said, I am so sorry. I apologize for that. Um, it wasn't my intention to do that. I'm so sorry about that. This person has consistently asked me to coffee. So just being able to be okay to build those relationships, to be and make mistakes. It's okay to make mistakes. I would love for our campus to be brave enough to make mistakes and to be humble enough to apologize for those mistakes, whether you understand why it hurt somebody or not. I go through a visualization sometimes when I do trainings about when my kids were little and they would step on somebody's foot. Yeah, they did it by accident, but I sure would make them turn around and say, I'm sorry, because they accidentally hurt or harmed somebody. It was an accident. That's absolutely fine. But you need to turn around and have humility and apologize, whether you think that hurt that person or not, whether you understand it or not. That would be the ideal campus because from that foundation, everything is possible. From that foundation of building relationships for people who are different than you, everything is possible. That's what I would like.
Alrighty, I have a person who works in the DEI space. There's increasingly political pressure, political pushback in our systems
Yes.
against DEI. And I'm living in Wisconsin, and the legislation is pushing UW to eliminate/unfund DEI programs.
Yeah.
How can those who support DEI respond, and why is this happening?
Yeah. Well, the why is it happening? I think is part of those myths. The messaging campaign that diversity, equity, and inclusion is an evil thing. I also think about, oh my goodness, what is another word that got so my kids watch Miraculous Ladybug. I don't know if anybody watches that show, but there's like a little icon that the cartoon character uses, and it has like a it evilizes things. Like it'll make the person that it touches do something negative. The person is the same person; they're just doing something negative. And that's what I'm trying. It kind of evilizes diversity, equity, and inclusion. What was that theory called? Oh, critical race theory. How critical race theory became like evilized. When really it's something that folks learn in law school. Um, it's a legal theory that students in law school learn about. And so it's become something that has been misconstrued. And I believe that um, there's a negative message being sent about diversity, equity, and inclusion. That's why I think it's happening. I also think that there's fear there from some people, from groups of people who may feel like, and I'm not sure, they may feel like they're losing what they see America to be, power, maybe privileges. When fear comes into a play, people do a lot of things to stop movement. So I also think that's probably one of the reasons why DEI has become so politicized. Is because our society is changing, which really excites me, but I don't know that it excites a lot of people. Um, or maybe it excites a lot of people, but it doesn't excite some. I don't know. What can we do? I think we have to start with education, education, education. We have to um, educate people about what DEI is, what it really truly is. And let me start with the foundation. We have to first build relationships with people. We have to go into the spaces and places that we wouldn't normally go. I have a girlfriend who voted for somebody who I would have never voted for. I would just I just couldn't even understand how this girlfriend voted for this person. Right? I just couldn't get it. So we sat down and we had a conversation, and I just asked questions. This person is my friend to this day, but we have a relationship where we could sit down and talk about how I felt like this particular person that they voted for could hurt or harm my family with their policies, could hurt or harm me as a human being. Right. So being able to have those dialogues and those conversations. There's an organization called Braver Angels. Their mission is to do exactly that. It's to bring together folks from different political views. I would look that up. I think they're having a conference soon to be able to learn the skills that it takes to be able to have those dialogues, build relationships, and then start that educational shift, because it's going to take an educational shift and a paradigm shift for us to be able to teach people what diversity, equity, and inclusion really is about.
I think this question goes a little bit along with what you just mentioned, and it is a point of clarity. What is the difference between equality and equity?
Mm-hmm. So equality is all about giving people the same thing. When you think about being fair, that's usually what people think about with equality. So it would be like, Kaylee, myself, you would give us the exact same Christmas gift. So you would give us both a size 11 women's red tap shoe, right? That's equality. I mean, you're giving us both exactly the same thing. It's fair. We're all getting the same thing. So Kaylee, what are you gonna do with that size 11 red tap shoe?
It might not fit.
It doesn't fit you?
It might not fit.
Oh my goodness. So you might need something specific to
It
your
might not.
foot to be able to learn how to tap dance? Oh
That
my
is.
goodness. So maybe we'll have to move to equity, which would mean getting you the right size shoe, right? I'm a 9.5. I would not be able to wear that size 11. You might be a size, let's say you're size 7. You may not be able to wear that size 11. Now we both got tap shoes, but they fit our feet. We got what we needed to be successful. So that barrier was removed by taking the shoe size down. So equality is fairness. When you go to, let's say trick or treat, right? Maybe they have one thing for each, but everybody gets the same thing. Whether you're allergic to peanuts or not, you got the Snickers bar. Okay. Equity is about knowing that I'm allergic to peanuts and not giving me a Snickers bar, but giving me something that I could enjoy.
Thank you. That's very simple terms, very easy to understand. Thank you. Okay. What new policies and programs? I know a lot of this is data driven on your survey results here.
It will be.
But we do have that question kind of brought back specifically to IWU, and if you've been able to implement anything in your time so far.
Yeah, so there are things that I'm working on. Nothing that has been fully implemented yet. And again, these are just like ideas. Who knows if we will push through with all of these different ideas. But one of the things, so of course, I met with lots of people on campus. And one of the things we have in our library is I call it our social justice book. I know that's not what it's called, but that's what I call it. It's like a social justice, like a little room that's been devoted to social justice topics, books that have been devoted to the topics. One of the things that one of our librarians shared with me is that that book is not utilized, that space is not utilized very well. Also, during my tour of Illinois Wesleyan, reading the vision and the mission statement, understanding the powerful things that have happened on campus, we are a justice-based campus. We just are. MLK has been here twice. Our founder and his words, like they're just, our foundation is all about justice. And so one of the things that I'm looking into in partnership with faculty and students and staff is to be able to create a social justice walking tour on campus that has different placards on campus where significant events happen that support our vision in Illinois Wesleyan. So you'll be able to take a QR code. I'm hoping, this is going to take money, y'all. So, but you'll take a QR code, you'll scan, or your phone, you'll scan the QR code, you'll get a video of what happened historically in that space and place and how little Illinois Wesleyan made a huge impact in our community, in our country, in our world. I think I said this in my presentation earlier, we are a gem. Illinois Wesleyan is a gem. We have we have such an amazing history and so many amazing people that I think we need to share that with our community. We really need to share it with the world. So I'm hoping that this social justice walking tour will bring community members in, teach our students about what an amazing place you chose, Illinois Wesleyan. Give some pride to our faculty and staff. So this is again, a very early stages. Hopefully this will happen. But that's one of the initiatives that I'm hoping to kind of roll out on campus.
Cool. Alrighty. You've spoke a lot about mission and vision of
Yeah.
Illinois Wesleyan and
Yep.
what's documented on our website of
Yep.
those two. Are there any systematic DEI deficiencies or policies that are not necessarily consistent with that mission or vision? And what would you do to change? What are you working to change any of those if there are?
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of times what I run into is when I talk about that legal versus ethical, right? So hate speech is legal. It is legal, legal, legal. You can say whatever you want. Freedom of speech is very important. You can say whatever you want. Is it is it the most ethical thing to do? Is to use speech that says, "Hey, I don't like you. You're pretty disgusting. I don't even see you as human." Oh, right? Like those are a lot of the I don't know what you call that, conflicts, difficulties that I come into in my job. So systemically, and this is going to be for any institution of higher education, systemically, we have our laws, right, that we need to follow. For me, it's going to be about building a culture of caring. Point. So, yes, you can spew as much hate speech as you want. It is your legal right to do that. At what point can we create policy and procedure? Maybe it's student code of conduct, maybe it's for faculty, maybe it's for staff that helps to support a place again where everybody can feel like they belong, even though people have the legal right to do things. So I hope that answers your question about systemic changes on campus. It's about building policy and procedure and a culture that really helps to support students, faculty, and
All right. We are getting close to time here. I just want to be transparent with everyone. We are likely not going to get to all of the questions here listed today, but we are doing our very best. Another question here, and we probably have time for maybe 2, 3.
yeah, that's perfect.
Does that work for you, Takisa? Okay. You mentioned the death of George Floyd. Can you talk a little bit more about how that event influenced the field of DEI?
Absolutely, absolutely. So I was about to talk specifically about higher education, but I can talk generally.
Okay.
After the passing of George Floyd, a lot of people in general, I will talk about higher education, a lot of our students, faculty, and staff felt very unheard, uncared for. That incident for a lot of people was traumatic. It was like watching your dad or your brother um, be killed. Be killed. It was difficult for certain populations of our country to be able to function. So you're expected to go back to work. You're expected to go back to classes. Um, when you're watching people who may look like your family, or for the first time, you're seeing something that you didn't think would ever happen in the United States of America. So you're kind of having an awakening moment that is this cognitive dissonance. Those times are really important for us to acknowledge specifically in higher education. And I don't know that institutes of higher education did a good job understanding the impact of that on our students, faculty, and staff. Because of that, because of the impact, many people decided that it was time to lend their voice to a movement to understand the impact of violence on the Black community specifically. It started a lot of dialogue for people to hear and understand the reality of being Black in America, not just in the 1920s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, but here and now today, what that is like. And so institutes of higher education specifically and companies, right, learned, okay, we were kind of built to focus on this specific population of folks, right? People in the power positions have specific lenses that might not be as diverse, right? So how can we make sure that we are supporting and taking care of our entire community? That is how DEI, in a nutshell, that's how DEI professionals really kind of came to be, to think about, okay, who are we missing? So those folks who are a lot of times invisible. I'll share this really quickly too. When you think about how we do voting, right? It's the majority that wins. What if you are the minority? What if you are the one in the room with a different viewpoint? You never win. This was a time where those people who were the minority were saying, I need you to see me right now. And people in leadership weren't able to do that. And so they came to experts like myself who have gone through the research, understand the data, understands how to support underrepresented or minoritized communities, help them feel heard and understood so that we can recruit and retain and have people come to these types of things as alumni and want to give back because we have made their experience one of family and support. And so that's kind of how the field came to be. The murder of George Floyd was a catalyst for a movement where people said, we may not know how to support all of our titans, right? All of our population. So let's find somebody who can help us do that.
All right. We have just 1 minute left, and I'm going to end on one last question here. But I think it does summarize, our main audience here today that is listening, which is alumni. And how can alumni support your work?
Absolutely. Yeah. So honestly, I would say that I'm going to go financially. My office needs support. So currently I don't yet have a budget line for my office. I need financial support. That would be amazing. If you hear about diversity initiatives that are coming out, like the social justice walking tour, that you could financially support, I would love that. Any DEI initiative that happens at Illinois Wesleyan's campus. But I also know that sometimes we don't have the financial means to be able to support DEI in that way. Oh, you have so much more. So, like I said, you have your diversity of thought. If you have ideas, if you can volunteer time, if what is it, time, people power. When I have an event, if you could come and move tables, like that would be wonderful. So any way that you feel like you could support, and you all know your gifts more than I know your gifts. So for example, I'm a community builder. I love being in the community. I love creating things. So I know a lot of community members. So one of the things that I do for my organizations is I go, oh, Kaylee, you got to meet George. Like you all have to come together because you all are doing the same thing. You have what he needs, he has what you need, get together. So if you have any of those connections, if you know your gift and you feel like you can support DEI at Illinois Wesleyan, please reach out to me. And I'll be sending calls out when I get my data to be able to ask requests for very specific plans.
Thank you, Dr. Pina. I want to thank you again for taking time out of your busy schedule to share with us today. And I really want to thank all of you who have joined us today. This is our final Titan Talk of 2024. So not only today, but all year, you've joined in on these Titan Talks to learn about various issues, university happenings, and to learn from experts. And we are just so thankful for each and every one of you. Again, a reminder, as always, a recording of today's Titan Talk is going to be available tomorrow, and it will be sent straight to your email inboxes, or you can view it on the Office of Alumni Engagement YouTube page. Again, thank you so much, Dr. Pina. I hope to see you all in 2024 for our next Titan Talk, which will be a part of the innovation series. And in the meantime, have a wonderful holiday season, everyone. I hope it is filled with good friends, family, and lots of relaxation for you all.
Take care. Bye-bye.